Man, Ev, what's going on?
What's good? What's good?
Welcome to the podcast. Dad, can you hear me? Podcast about spirituality, consciousness, and just exploring our own existence. Inspired by the recent transition of my pops, man. And we just here, me and Ev. Usually we have Daniel with us, but he's not here today. And we just gonna explore a couple things, man. And actually, we do have an interview on deck today as well. So we look forward to that. Just like it's been a rough 2 weeks, man. We lost X, lost Black Rob, two hip hop icons. But like even within their death, it makes you even realize with their transition that love never dies. You know what I'm saying? As painful as death is, love is always right there to save the day. You know what I'm saying? Because when X passed, there was nothing but love. You know what I'm saying? Moving through the streets. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, that was the case for all of them. With Rob, with Black Rob, with Shock G, with X. It was nothing but love just being poured everywhere. The Rough Riders went out in New York City, did the little bike shit, all the way out in Brooklyn. Like that's what you got to do to kind of keep people alive, keep their spirit alive, keep their being here. Pretty much is pouring out that love. That's the real immortality right there, and that's what they got when they transitioned.
Sure, right. Shock G too, man. That too. I mean, all these things, man. We're going through a rough time with this pandemic, and the universe it's just changing things up a lot, man. And it's like here today, gone tomorrow, man. And it's like it gets you really, it puts you really in touch with your own reality, and really looking at your own mortality and what's the difference between mortality and I guess immortality. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you definitely start to question existence a lot more when you look at the abruptness of death. You start to wonder if like these things are just a little bit commingled, like they're closer in relation than you realize. Like the fact that we all grew up thinking Kobe was immortal. At least I did. Like I just like what the hell could Kobe? Like nothing can stop that guy. And death can just be that abrupt and that simple. And you start to look at it a little differently, and realize that a lot of people prepare themselves for that moment a lot earlier than you might think. And that's kind of what we're really getting at with this whole spirituality thing.
Sure. That's a fact. And today we actually have an interview with a world-renowned meditation teacher, spiritual teacher, Kelvin Chin. And with him, you know what I'm saying, we're going to definitely explore some of these concepts, birth, life, death, and just, put the needle on things, because even myself, I could even admit, like, that when it came to death, it was something that I was conditioned not to really, look at. You know what I'm saying? My whole life, I was always scared of the inevitable. You know what I'm saying? And it's not until recently that I've actually explored the concept of death and really understand, what death means. And
Was that him?
Kelvin, are you there?
I'm here. How you
Hey,
guys doing?
hey,
Great,
Kelvin,
great.
great. Just want to let our audience know that Kelvin is on the line. We were giving a little background on you, Kelvin, but
hmm
myself and Evan, we just I don't know if you're familiar, but right now in the hip hop community, DMX, he just recently passed, man, and he was like
Mm.
a guy that was facing a lot of suffering on one end,
Mm.
and through his music, but on another part of his music, he always
hmm
understood his own soul, and like a lot of
hmm
his music touched things, 15, 20 years ago, that these concepts, man, that a lot of us weren't ready to receive because it was so
Mm.
abstract. It wasn't really left brain, ish. It was kind of
hmm
like a little deeper. It was a little soulful. It's him, struggling with his own higher self at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was letting out music. So
Mm.
it's one of those things where his passing is like there is like a rebirth though, but it's
Hmm.
death is painful. But we're glad to see you on the phone, man, and we just want to let our audience know, like, who you are and your impact and your influence within this spiritual community and this, you know, I don't want to call you. I've actually read a couple of recommendations. It
Hmm.
referred to you as a new age, one of the best new age thinkers. Is new age something that you resonate with, or?
I don't know. It's a phrase that people use. I'm here to help people, and I help people of all backgrounds. They're into new age spiritual stuff or they're not. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm here to help people, human beings, be better and be happier and get along better and have more enjoyable lives. But yeah, I just brought up DMX. I saw he died April 9th at White Plains Hospital. I actually did a training, some of my work with staff at White Plains Hospital, interestingly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, recently, like last year, 6
Wow.
months ago. Yeah.
Wow, what a coincidence. I mean,
I know. Yep.
So Kelvin, can you just? I know in regards to some of your back history, but can you just let our
Sure.
audience know in regards to, because you
Sure.
know, your story is
Yeah.
definitely unique and interesting, and just this path
Yeah.
that you're on. I see
Mhm.
myself following something similar, but this is not
Mhm.
this is like this path is the road less traveled. You know what I mean? Especially at the time when you went versus now,
Yeah.
where the consciousness of the planet is a little bit raised, where people are more willing to go
Mm.
this direction. But when you did it, it probably was like a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah. So I learned to meditate uh, when I was 19 years old. Um, that's the first thing that I am aware of, like me doing actively, that kind of shifted my mind, body, spirit, consciousness, you want to call it, in this kind of direction that you're alluding to. But when I did that, when I learned, I was really stressed out. I had just had very high anxiety. I was in college at the time up in New Hampshire, and very high anxiety. That's why I learned to meditate. I did not learn for spiritual reasons. Now you know, and I'll briefly mention some of the spiritual stuff that has happened to me over the decades. But when I first learned, I just learned because I was stressed out, and that's what what opened the door for me at that point in my life. Now, if you go back, you probably don't know this, Camad, but um, when I was 2 or 3 years old, uh, I found out when I was a teenager that when I was a year or 2 or 3 years old, my aunts told me that I would speak with beings that they couldn't see. When I'd go visit them, they were in junior high and high school when my mom was the eldest. So when I was the new grandchild, the first grandchild in the clan, I would go visit my grandparents, and of course my aunts were all there, still at home, living at home, and so they would babysit and play with me. And they told me many years later, when I was a teenager, that when I was a little infant, I used to talk with my friends and play with them, sitting alone in my grandparents' living room. So that's something that's completely third party. I still have no recollection of that, but they've told me that as recently as a couple of years ago. They reminded me.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty wild, right?
So I guess
So
that was like it was kind of like an indigo child.
something, and that must have been 1953, 1952, 53, when they were telling me that this was going on that I don't have a memory of. So anyway, what I do have a memory of is I learned to meditate when I was 19 years old, and it turned my life around. So my stress dissipated, it reduced and went away. And about 7 years into meditation, I started having past life memories. And then about another 10 years after that, in the mid 1980s, I started communicating with the other side. So I didn't even believe in reincarnation. and past lives when I had those experiences in the mid-1970s. And I was not looking for it. It just came out of the blue. And same thing with the communication with the other side in the mid-1980s. So all of that has continued to present. And as you know, I've been teaching meditation all these years, and I'm teaching it again full-time now again for the last 10 years or so through my nonprofits, and then helping people with death and dying and with the afterlife and all that, covering that in my first two books that are out now, right?
Wow. Let me ask you a question in regards to like past life memories, and I'm sitting with because sometimes I explore my own past life memories, but then I know one thing in psychology, they have this thing called false memory, or like the Mandela effect, where like a memory that you have might not even be real. Like, what do you think is the whole thing? Like when you have a past life, because I believe in past life memories, but then I know that there's actually a Mandela effect where you can have a false memory. How do you distinguish in your own consciousness of which one's which? Yeah.
So first of all, I come at this as a skeptic.
Okay.
Like I told you, if you asked me in 1976, before I had these experiences, if I thought about reincarnation, I would just kind of chuckle politely with you and said, "Okay, Camad, what's for dinner?"
Right.
Change the subject. But to answer your question, the way I look at it is, these are experiences, they're subjective, and you're absolutely right. Could it be our imagination making stuff up? That's possible. So then what I look at is, are there outside corroborative sources that can give credibility to what we think, in this case, is a past life memory? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. So my point is that I look at things, is the evidence reliable? So reliable meaning, okay, what has anybody else seen me or said anything about me, about experiences that I've had? Or, for example, another angle of looking at it is, have I known some stuff that I didn't know as Kelvin Chen, and then later checked, either looking up on, now we got Wikipedia, or back in the 70s and 80s, I go look up an encyclopedia, Encyclopedia Britannica or something, and say, oh, look at that. That's actually a word that means something, and that I came up with, or something that Kelvin Chin never studied, and this is an ancient language. That's actually happened to me a number of times. So I'll give you an example. So one of the things that happened that I actually looked up was I was with my daughter, and we were both meditating in the hotel room, and I blurted out, in my meditation, I blurted out the word Saracens. Now, do you know what Saracens are? Have you ever heard that word before?
No.
Have
you heard that?
No idea.
No, Saracens. So neither did I. I didn't know was it a noun? Was it a verb? Was it an adjective? I didn't know. And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what it meant. So, but when I said it, I was seeing a vision, Camad, of me being in a battle, and I was fighting, and it was very dusty, and I felt like a very dry, desert, arid, kind of environment, so forth. A lot of dust. I was on horseback with a sword and this and that. Okay, that was the experience I had, and I yelled that word out several times. And my daughter sitting in the other chair of the hotel room, going, "Daddy, you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know. We're having one of those experiences." See, my kids have seen me in this kind of mode. They know about this past life stuff since before they were born. I was having it, right? So anyway, it's no big deal. She goes, "Oh, okay." So she went back to meditating. Dad's over there in the corner of the hotel room yelling Saracen. So I looked it up, right? Afterwards, I go, "What the heck is that?" Turns out Saracens is the old term that was used for Muslims before 1300 AD. So the word Muslims, Muslims, we know who Muslims are. They follow Muhammad and Islam, the religion, and so forth. That's a relatively new term as of 1300 AD to present. Before that, They were called Saracens. I had no idea. Did not know this at all. Okay, so that was fairly recent. That experience was probably in 2010, I want to say. So recent in my history. So about 11 years ago. But I've had this memory of being in the Crusades since about 1979.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but so there's a potential external piece of evidence, like something that I didn't know what it meant, and so forth and so on. Here's another one. So when I first had that Crusader memory in 1979, I saw myself in a vision. So a vision. It wasn't anything other than I was just lying down resting. So I wasn't asleep, I wasn't awake, I wasn't meditating, I wasn't dreaming. I was in that in between state. Just kind of relaxing. Lying there.
Sure.
And you know how the TV screen can go on in your mind. Like in the dreams, we see things in our dreams, obviously. So it was kind of like that. That turned on, except I wasn't dreaming, I wasn't sleeping, I was just lying there resting. And I had just finished meditating, but now I was not meditating, so I was just resting afterwards, right? So the TV screen goes on, and I'm walking into this big stone room because I could see the stone floors, the walls, the ceilings. I looked up, and I scuba dive, so I can judge space, height pretty easily by looking up. Like, oh, that's about 40 feet. Oh, that's about 50 feet. Because I've done a lot of scuba diving in the open ocean, and so I looked up. There's a 40-foot high ceiling, stone room. There's nobody in it, and all the furniture is pushed to the walls, except there's one piece of furniture in the middle of the room, and it's a full-length mirror. So I walk up to the mirror. So again, I'm looking through my eyes. I can't see myself, obviously. I'm just walking into this room. But I walk up to the mirror, and then I see myself in the mirror. And what I saw was this big guy. I didn't know how big I was at this point. I just knew I was big because I took up the whole mirror. And I was standing, right up close to the mirror. I was like huge guy, and I had reddish hair, long reddish hair, and a reddish blondish beard. So reddish hair. So I didn't have black hair. I didn't have brown hair. I didn't have pure blonde hair. I had reddish hair. So it was something about the red, okay, that stuck in my mind. And I saw this big guy in full-length chainmail, like from head to toe, chainmail, and with a white tunic and a cross on it. And so that I knew that I was a crusader, right? So here's another piece that later I figured out, or I had this knowingness that this about 10 years later. This is how non-linear these things can happen chronologically. Maybe it was 5 or 10 years later. I didn't write this down. I suggest that you guys people write this stuff down, because I didn't do this. I never thought I'd be talking about this publicly, so I was like, well, big deal. But write it down, because you never know. And so maybe it was 5 or 10 years later, I had the knowingness that Crusader memory, I was 6'5", 225, 230 pounds. I was a big guy. And this is in 1100 AD. There were not a lot of big people, 6'5", 230 pounds in 1100 AD.
Wow.
And there were not that many people in the Crusades that big. There was basically one person that big, and there is nobody that big who had red hair except this one person. And I was a leader in the Third Crusade. So that's how I figured out who I was in that memory, right? But see all the pieces that came together that I didn't know.
Sure.
Over 1979, and then in the 1980s, and then in 2010, another piece. So that was, and then another time, I had a memory in 1977 where I started to tell an experience to a friend of mine, and he finished it. And I said, "How did you know that?" And he goes, "Well, because I was there. I found you 2,000 years ago. I was the person who found you, and turns out we were brothers back then."
Sure.
So that was completely so that's an example. Those are examples of, to answer your question. Is it absolute proof? No. But how can you explain these things? Another example was I found out recently, just it was 2018, just a few years ago, 2019, 2018, a couple of years ago. This guy I met recently, was a meditation teacher in the same organization. I used to teach TM, Transcendental Meditation. You know,
Right.
the Beatles learned that back they learned in 67, 68, studied with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Well, that's what I learned back then, and I taught with his organization. I was an international leader in this organization for about 10 years back in the 70s. And then I moved away when they went off in a different direction. Well, there's this guy named Charlie Lutz, who I never met. I never spoke with him. I never heard any of his lectures, who was part of the TM organization, but he was part of the spiritual arm of the organization. So you remember I told you I was not into spirituality when I learned TM? I was into the science stuff and getting rid of stress. And so there was a whole science and education, business and athletics arm that was separate from the spiritual arm. So I was in that other arm, not the spiritual stuff. So this Charlie Lutz guy, I heard recently, like a couple of years ago, one of the guys who was TM teachers who was into Charlie Lutz back then, told me that Charlie Lutz in 1973 was talking about a TM teacher in his lectures. Charlie Lutz evidently used to give weekly lectures in Los Angeles at this SRM that was called Spiritual Regeneration Movement, which was the spiritual arm of the TM organization. He used to give weekly lectures there, and I heard recently that he was giving lectures in 1973, and he was mentioning that there was this TM teacher in the organization who had also been this person and this person, one of which was a Prussian leader in the 1700s. That was 4 years before I had my first memories. And he was talking about lifetimes that I later had memories about. How crazy is that?
Wow, that's crazy.
That's pretty crazy.
I mean, I don't know.
Right?
Ev, I mean, have you had any of these experiences? I'll tell you this, Kelvin, the way I have got myself kind of acclimated to like past life memories, myself and Ev, we both hip hop heads, right? And
Yeah.
Jay-Z on the Black album, he has a verse where he says, "You are who you are, player. You were who you were before you got here." You know what I mean? And so
interesting.
So when he first said that line, it resonated with me. So basically, he's saying that your life plan was already dictated before you got here, which means that you must have had a past life. Like this life you're in right now must be a continuation of a life you already had.
Right.
It can't be like you're just now starting from scratch, even if the illusion is that you feel like you started from scratch.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
no, I've heard about that song actually. Yeah, people have pointed that out to me. Yeah. That's exactly right. So he's referencing that, pre-birth stuff, and we may have, made decisions before we come into a lifetime, and we may have had other lifetimes too. Yeah. There's some cool songs out there that reference that are current, fairly current,
Yeah, definitely a couple questions for you. So would you liken those visions to like lucid dreaming? I can't say I've had the privilege of like having visions of anything that vivid, but in terms of like your subconscious or conscious rather presence in that moment, would you liken it to lucid dreaming? Yeah,
it can be very similar. So yeah, the short answer is yes. My very, very first actual past life memory, I didn't even know was a past life memory. It came to me in a dream. Well, I had a dream, and I didn't know it had anything to do with a past life. I just thought it was a very, very, very powerful dream. That's when I started telling my friend George this dream that I had like in early 1977 or something, when we were on a long meditation course over in Switzerland for 2 months, every day, all day. We're meditating all day, every day for 2 months. And I started to tell him about that dream, and he finished it. That's when I just told you, where he told me, I found you. I said, I got all freaked out. I was like, what? How did you know that? And he goes, I found you 2,000 years ago. So definitely. But it can come in all different times. Like, so sometimes it's very much could be like a lucid dream. It could come in our dreaming. Why? Because I think that in our dreaming, we tend to be less, we're more open, less barriers, fewer barriers,
Right.
We're just kind of more open to whatever. is going on in our dreams, even if sometimes in our dreams really weird stuff can happen in our dreams too. And that's because we're more open. And
Right.
I think I think that's a very common time when, whether it's past life stuff, communications from the other side, from dead loved ones and so forth, very often they'll come in dreams because our mind is more receptive. It's more open. But now, since this has been happening to me since 1977, it'll happen to me in the shower, I'm washing dishes, I'm driving the car, and I don't have the radio on, so it's just kind of quiet, and I'm not talking to anybody. And, so it can happen any time. But, yeah, that's very common that happens in dreams, and can be very similar to what you're saying, like a lucid dream, like a very, very clear dream. Yeah.
It's actually a perfect segue into my other question, which was how exactly you were able to receive those experiences so positively. Like, I guess, for people who are new to meditation, like people who might think that's a manifestation of their subconscious and they're losing their mind. Was that just a matter of you meditating for so many years and a matter of practice and receiving the benefits of, just being at peace? So you just received those experiences more positively than others might?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way of putting it in a nutshell. Yeah, I mean, because, look, I mean, we human beings, we filter everything through our mind. And what does that mean? That may be through our past experiences, typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
or our belief systems and so forth. And so, my belief system at that point was pretty open, pretty free from fear in terms of my, beliefs about the universe and, life, living life. I've always been a pragmatist, a practical person. So to me, it's always like, how can I improve the quality of my life and live a life more enjoyably without hurting other people as much as humanly possible? It doesn't mean that I have never hurt people. I've hurt lots of people unintentionally, or just get the list of old girlfriends, and talk to them. but there's a long list of those. But it's just but has my intention been to try to be a good person? Yeah. So that's been my intention, and that's been my filter, is my point. And so fairly fear-free. And so I think the meditation had definitely helped with that, since I learned when I was 19 years old, and clearing out the junk, basically the garbage, all the stresses and stuff and the anxieties over the years before I started having these experiences that we're talking about. Probably, as you say, was a good way to plow the field, so to speak, and clear out all the weeds.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No, definitely. And no, this is good stuff, man, because Kelvin, as you know, man, meditation is something that is now, after the pandemic, I see people in yoga as well, but wellness is in the forefront. But for me personally, I got introduced to meditation in the early 2000s because I was suffering from my own mental illness. And, for me, is like I say, I always use the rap lens. Jay-Z, again, on the song Can I Live, he said, I meditate like a Buddhist. And and he said, but when he said this was 96, it kind of stood out to me. But meditation was always looked upon, because we live in a society where it's kind of like categories, and it's like, if you're a man, meditation, just fight yourself, fight your way through it. You know what I mean? So it was almost like
it's an enemy to masculinity somehow. It's to get there.
Yeah, like it's demasculinity.
Right.
The perception. Not now, because I feel like we've evolved, but it was So for me, it was almost like I was meditating in secret. You know what I mean? It was like I was a closet meditator, if that's possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. And, there's still that stigma out there, a little bit of that categorical kind of thinking in that stigma, what kind of ways you just described. But I think they'll always be that. But look at Tom Brady I don't know how regularly he is in his meditation now, but I know he meditated for a while, and his wife Giselle, she learned to meditate when she was 17, 18 years old. So she's been meditating for 20 something years. That's why he got into it. And there's a ton of I've taught a bunch of professional athletes, NBA, some of the Boston Bruins years ago, et cetera. And so it's hey, these guys are getting hit in the they're all padded up with with all their pads on the playing field, and they're getting whacked around, and these guys are meditating. So it's just not like
right.
these aren't wussy guys. These are tough guys. So but the thing is, people, high performance people, whether you're an athlete, a business person, or just a college student, I mean, it's you want to have that extra edge. You want to have that extra sharpness to your mind, your consciousness, and you look at the NFL. There's every one of the 1,700 players in the NFL is physically fit. Really, even the guys who are wearing 360 pounds can probably outrun all three of us.
Very easily.
You know what I mean? They're 360, 380 pounds. But these guys can haul. They're in decent shape, no matter how much they weigh. They may not have a six pack, but they're in good cardiovascular shape. Look, so what's the difference amongst those 1,700 players? It's the mental game. It's the mental game. The ones who really win in life, whether you're a professional athlete or you're just like a scrub player like me who used to play pickup games, it's the mental. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's when the winning and losing happen. The success in life happens, really.
Sure. I mean, would you say, do you think to the human condition that the mind is everything and everything else is just follows along suit? Because our body and everything, we think that we are our mind, our body, our soul is all one separate thing, but it's really, what I mean? Like you said, the mind, I feel like the mind, if you realize the mind connects it all three together, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not really as separate as it seems.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's my experience, is that our mind is the primary connector of all of that. Our mind. And so when I use the word mind, because Camad, I work in 47 countries now, remotely, on Zoom and so forth. I teach in 47 countries. So I like to use words that are easy to understand, because often I'm speaking to people who are English is their second, third, fourth language. But their English is a heck of a lot better than whatever my abilities, which is zero in their language.
Word up.
Right? And so I like to use easy to understand English, but I also use the word mind with the fluent American and English speaking students of mine too, because it's easy to understand. Mind, spirit, consciousness, soul, to me, they're all the same. And that is what is the connector, as you say, for all of the above, the mental, physical, emotional, everything, is our consciousness. And so that's where the separation occurs in life, amongst humans, is, and whether you're on the battlefield of daily life or whether you're literally on the battlefield in Iraq or Afghanistan. I was just watching a movie last night. That's why I thought of that. But, it's with the separation comes in the mental and the decisions we are making mentally in those split-second moments. And in some cases in Afghanistan and Iraq, I work with a lot with veterans and some active military, because, I have the experience teaching meditation in the military as well.
Right.
So, you're in a life-death situation, literally in those situations. Split-second mental decision can mean the difference between life and death. So a sharp mind is critically important. Now, I'm also a proponent of being in our physical body, because we are on planet Earth. We're here in planet Earth. Be in the body. Don't take care of your body. Don't divorce yourself from the body. Take care of it. I exercise. You know me. I exercise every day. I swim 3 times a week, and I've been doing this for since I was, I don't know, born or something, whatever. But we should eat well. We should take care of our physical body, and we should enjoy being in a physical body and everything that goes along with the enjoyment of being in a physical body and taking care of it. So yes, we are a soul, a consciousness, a mind. That's our primary, mode of existence, let's say, through eternity. But we can take on different physical forms. So while we're in a physical form, I'm a big proponent of enjoying it and taking care of the physical machine that we call our physical body.
Sure.
So what are some misconceptions you'd say people have with meditation and mindfulness? I know, like, just through learning, I've heard that mindfulness isn't necessarily the Buddhist interpretation of just abandoning desire. Like, you don't necessarily have to go to that degree. Like, for people, like you were saying, like people who are newbies, who are maybe victims of PTSD, or people who are just simply dealing with stress. What are some of those misconceptions you'd say, just through your years of experience?
Well, I think some of the basic misconceptions that people have are that, first of all, meditation. Some people still think this meditation is some religious thing. Well, it's not. Meditation is secular meditation of all kinds. And you mentioned mindfulness is a form of Buddhist meditation. And this professor at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, in 1970, secularized it. He happens to be Buddhist himself, but he came up with this word mindfulness. So people now think of meditation as mindfulness, but mindfulness is its own meditation technique. So that's also a misconception that's kind of more recent, where like I don't teach mindfulness, for example. I teach a much easier version of it. So mindfulness is an easier version of a Buddhist form of meditation, because there are many forms of Buddhist meditation, and some of them are very difficult, like Zen, very concentrative, much more difficult than mindfulness form of Buddhist meditation. But what I teach is neither, and what I teach is very, very easy. So I think one of the big misconceptions out there is that meditation involves focus, like mindfulness involves focus on the breath and so forth. A big misconception is that meditation involves focus on something, focus or control or concentration on something, or clearing the mind of your thoughts. That's a big, huge misunderstood, or a misconception. It's the correct understanding for some meditation techniques, but not mine. Mine is all about ease of technique, not clearing the mind, not focusing and not concentrating, and not trying to control the mind. Instead, the way I teach it, we go with what the mind is doing, and then we overlay on top of that a specific technique, which I teach people step by step. But so it's not just sitting there with your eyes closed, letting your mind wander, but you do allow your mind to wander, and you do allow your mind, without resisting anything your mind is doing, to do whatever it's going to do. And then we weave in this technique that I teach people with that understanding and attitude that we're not focusing, we're not controlling the mind, we're not clearing the mind of thoughts, and we're not manipulating or trying to make our thoughts think this way or that way. And then the other point is what our thoughts are about. So there's I think that's also a misconception, or a conception that's out there that's not what I teach, for example. So the content of your thoughts. So in other words, what you're thinking about. Are you thinking peaceful thoughts, or are you thinking having anxiety type thoughts? It doesn't matter in the way I teach the technique, and the anxieties go away. But guided meditations people are very familiar with, which is different from what I teach. But obviously in a guided meditation, you're not going to be guided to be thinking about your anxiety. You're going to be guided by whoever's doing the guided meditation to think about peaceful thoughts. So that's not a bad thing, and it can be helpful. So I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying, to answer your question, there are different ideas and different conceptions, and some of them are misconceptions about what all meditations techniques may involve. there's a wide range, is the point, of differences amongst different meditation techniques that are out there. And I'm a proponent of the easier the technique, the better.
Right, right. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, no,
That's definitely.
very, very, very interesting.
And I guess that leads us to our next thing, Kelvin, in regards to, just to let our audience know, you are an author, and I had a chance to, kind of read both your books. And the way for me, the way I came across it was, like you said, recently, my father passed, and I've been on my own spiritual journey with myself, just trying to become like, my mind I've always had like a mind that was moving so fast through time, and I didn't understand it. I thought I had ADHD. I went to a psychiatrist. Do your own remedies, drink, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Trying to figure it out. But over the last couple of years, the more information that's been available, the more I've been able to kind of come one with my consciousness. And I think one of the last stages, recently when my pops passed, which is how it inspired to do this podcast, I realized, for me, is I love my dad so much. It was like one of those things that I couldn't just say, this is just it. Like, death is final. And then I started to, I got the intuition that, death is there's no such thing. You know what I mean? It's just, quantum physics, I guess, or however, it's just perception. It's just form. Like, it changed a different form. And I came across your book. You know what I mean? And as I read your book, that's when I reached out to you, because your book was powerful. I know in regards to how you had your own experiences when your own mom passed, but and the thing is, this for you, you were having this intuition a long time ago in regards to knowing that death is I guess Jesus had said it too, like, you know what I mean, in regards to the whole resurrection story, I guess is him saying that there is no death, no, the body and the soul lives. But can you just explain a little bit about your book and this whole concept? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, you're talking about my first book, which is called Overcoming the Fear of Death, and that's the main title of the book, Overcoming the Fear of Death. It's available on all the online booksellers, Amazon, and all the other ones, the book Barnes and Noble, and everybody else that's out there around the world. But the subtitle, it's also available print, ebook, and I do the audio book narration of this book. But the subtitle is Through Each of the Four Main Belief Systems. So the full title is Overcoming the Fear of Death Through Each of the Four Main Belief Systems. So I take a non-religious approach. So when I'm talking in the book about four main belief systems, they're not religious beliefs and they're not cultural beliefs about death. They're beliefs that I came up with in conversation, talking with one of my good friends, and we were saying, how can we talk about this without getting into religious stuff? Because we start stepping on people's toes. You start talking religion,
right.
And people think, well, no, in my religion we believe this. Oh, my religion we believe that. Oh, this is what happens after you die in my religion. So I said, we need to talk about this. We, as a human culture worldwide, we need to talk about this more, because it's like the taboo subject. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to look at, talking about death and dying and stuff. And we really need to talk about it more so we can reduce, in my opinion, the fears around it, because fears just limits our lives. So we came up with these four beliefs. So the four beliefs are this. The first one is the science belief. So scientists believe that there is no soul that continues, the mind doesn't continue, there's no such thing. The body dies, that's it. Everything shuts off. So that's the science belief. That's belief system. I call it in my book, I call it belief system number one. So the second belief system, I call it the fear of continued existence. So that's where somebody may believe in an afterlife, but they have fears about it for some reason, all kinds of different reasons we can talk about, but fear. And they believe in a continuation, but has some fear. And the third belief system is belief in an afterlife of some sort, but no fear. maybe even looking forward to it. So that's the third one. Fourth belief system is reincarnation, past lives, future lives, and so forth. Reincarnation, that's the fourth belief system. So, you know, people fall anywhere in that range, can fall anywhere in that range, but most people have one of those, or they might be a hybrid. They might be a fence sitter. I'm not sure if it's first or second, or maybe it's a little of both or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. And so what I do is I help people reduce their fears around death and dying. That's one of the things I do, in addition to teaching meditation and teaching classes about afterlife and so forth. So that's this book in a nutshell. So I cover all those four belief systems in here, and I talk about your death experiences, you know, glimpses into the other side. I have a lot of stories in here from other people. Everybody I know, these are all people I know, stories they've had about their own NDEs, near-death experiences, or stories about them communicating with dead loved ones. There's a lot of stories in here about that, and some stories about folks who have memories of other lifetimes. And I did not want to make this book about me, so I only put in my one lifetime in here, other lifetime memory I have about being a slave. I was African. It was very, very dark-skinned African. Somebody recently told me that I was probably from the Ivory Coast because I had that, you know, kind of blue-black skin. Mm-hmm. And interesting, I haven't told her this yet. She just left me a voice note on this recently. But I had separately knowledge. This is full circle to one of your original questions come out. How do you know that we're not making this stuff up? I knew that I was from the Ivory Coast. I don't know how I knew that. I just knew it. And then separately, I knew that like years later, then I saw my skin. Well, when I first saw myself, I saw my skin. But years later, I saw how dark my skin was, and it was that blue, they call it like blue-black color, that really dark color. And so recently, somebody just told me that I was probably from the Ivory Coast, which I had already known, but hadn't connected those dots. That memory is from 2,300 years ago, when I was a slave on a Carthaginian warship around 330 wow. BC. Yeah, a long time ago. So that one I do talk about in my book, because I talk about how these past life memories, I think we should use them as kind of a resource for learning about ourselves in ways that we can help ourselves in today's life now in 2021. So I use that life where I willed myself to stay alive. I used my mind to keep my body alive on a piece of wreckage in the Mediterranean 2,300 years ago. I've used that to remind myself of how powerful my mind was when I've gone through very, very, very difficult, trying times. And, you know, this lifetime is Kelvin Chen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Staying on the topic of overcoming the fear of death, like at least for me personally, and a lot of people I've talked to, it does seem like the biggest reason people fear it is either not being remembered or just dealing with the consequences of what you've dealt with, or what you've done, rather, while you were alive. Have those past memories been like the biggest tool? And like, what would you say to people who can't access those memories? What healing have you found from meditation to kind of alleviate those feelings?
Yeah, the meditation definitely helps heal those kind of past impressions or deep impressions left from those past life experiences. Mm-hmm. But even if somebody does not have past life memories, what I suggest that they look at is their emotional patterns that they are aware of in this lifetime. Because I think there's a direct link, that's been my experience anyway, it seems to be, there seems to be a direct link between our emotional patterns that we have, our likes and our dislikes, like the really deep stuff. Like, why do I really like that in that person? Why am I really attracted to that physical feature? Why am I really attracted to that kind of music? Why does that music really, you know, right. And it may not be the music from the 20th to 21st century, but I have this connection with it. It's weird. You know, I have a friend who's really into 1960s music. Well, she was born in the 1970s, right? So and now she thinks she's connected some dots. Now she thinks she died of a drug overdose in the 1960s. So you know, is that so? Look at our emotional patterns and our likes and our dislikes in this lifetime, and they can often inform us about past lives that we may have had that we may have no recollection of, and we may still not have a recollection of, but it can open up our self-development, because that's all we care about is our personal development now, because we live in the present, right? We live always in the continual present. The fact that I have this memory in the 2,300 years ago is irrelevant. It's just cocktail party talk. Who cares? I was a slave, you know, on a warship and so forth, and we got blown up, et cetera, et cetera. But how does that help me today? To me, that's where it's meaningful. That's where the memory becomes meaningful as opposed to just interesting, right?
Wow. No, it's deep, man. And it makes sense, because I think, and that's the thing, that when we go to school, we don't really, you know, we only, I guess, tap into one form of intelligence. I guess that's our conditioning as a species in school. But like past live memory, I think there's a big, you know, that's a big, that can be like a big tool for our own growth, because I look at kids, man, like 3 or 4 years old, and you can see, like, you know, yeah, they're exploratory, they're trying to figure out their environment, but a lot of these kids have, you know, like maybe it's you know, I guess it is a past life, like they have like a sense of knowledge that, you know, I don't know where they got that from. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, you know, who is it? Mozart was you know, creating the major music pieces when he was 3 years old, 4 years old, whatever. You know, what you think did he go to music school when he was 1 or 2 years? No. Where did that come from?
Right.
People think, oh, it was just a genius. It was just magic. You know, yeah. Well, you know, he was a genius, you know, musically, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there were seeds already there, you know, from other previous experiences. You know, I have a friend who has a nephew who's now much older, but I mention his story in my book, the first book, the Overcoming the Fear of Death book, when he was about 1.5 years, 2 years old, and he knew everything about the moons of Jupiter, and he had never seen any Discovery Channel TV shows or read any books or anything. Where does that come from? And he knew how many moons, and he knew all the details about these different moons, you know? So to me, I don't know for sure, but it seems to me like this kid was tapping into some old memories he had from another lifetime, where he probably was this astrophysicist of some sort studying the moons of Jupiter. And that was his focus, you know, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, maybe, because could even been in the 80s, because I don't see, in the 90s, he was born like in, you know, 2000 something, you know?
No, I definitely. I mean, even like you look at people like Michael Jackson. You know, I feel like Michael Jackson had a lot of past lives, and you know, with him as a young kid, he couldn't tell the difference between his past lives and his immediate human self, because he had a lot of pain in his human life in regards to his father. You know what I mean? His treatment he had. You know what I'm saying? He was kind of like shy. You know. But like, I think for him is, when I look at Michael Jackson, I see like a clash of his human self in the present, not understanding like all these gifts he was getting trained, that he was, you know, coming through past lives, and you know, it can be confusing, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Because everything, your whole life, even your present life, if you're an abusive, growing up under an abusive father, or you live in a neighborhood with crack. You know what I'm saying? Drugs around you. These are all signals, though, because information is nothing but a signal. So it's like I'm getting signals from my past life, and then I'm getting signals in this regular life. I'm confused, bro. Like, I'm overwhelmed. You know, and I'm trying to make sense of all these signals, and I'm trying to use one form of understanding, which is what's in front of me, which is my perception. But we know, like, your perception is not always the most accurate. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a good segue that's a good segue to my second book. Because it's how do we integrate all of this spiritual stuff, we'll call it, with living now, as you say in your Michael Jackson example, because it really, to me, it is all living it now, in the present, in our continual present. And so having all of this integrated, these, what many people consider these spiritual type experiences that are not normal. Now, for me, they're normal. So that's why I say, I don't even think of them as spiritual experiences anymore. They're just more experiences. But I get it. People think of them and talk about them in spiritual terms. How do we integrate that into the fabric of our normal daily living? And so that's why I say to people, it's not necessary that you remember all your past lives, but I think it's useful, like you guys are both of you are kind of suggesting, that we be open to them as a human culture and explore them when it seems appropriate, for when the 4-year-old or the 5-year-old kid is saying, hey, I used to wear earrings when I was in another life. This little boy is saying that. I have a story about that in my book, to his mom, because he was a woman in his previous lifetime, and so I think it's stuff to explore in a healthy educational way, as human beings, whether we be, whether in childhood or whenever these things pop up, and not treat them as kind of weird stuff that only crazy people have, because I am as grounded a person as you can find, and I was a doubter about all this stuff before it started happening to me. So this second book that I've written, Marcus Aurelius Updated, is the main title of the book. It's the purple book. Marcus Aurelius Updated, 21st Century Meditations on Living Life. That's the subtitle. So really, it's a focus of 67 essays focused on helping people live life more enjoyably in the 21st century. 67 essays that I've written, they're all original essays by me, on various subjects: emotions, life principles, meditation. There's a chapter on meditation in here, and the spiritual. So I'll just give you a kind of a few titles of some of the 67 essays. Success, winning, and happiness. Suffering and happiness. Unconditional love. Forgiveness. Relationships. Grieving. The ego. Cruelty. Getting beyond bullying. Self-interest and selfishness. How to choose the right meditation technique. How to allow the monkey mind to be. Attachment and illusion. 10 spiritual red flags. Spiritual insecurity. The idea of free will. The meaning of life. Dualism versus non-dualism. Unbundling enlightenment. Ego and God. So that gives you some idea. But when I say ego and God, this is also a non-religious approach towards talking about all these issues and topics. So I'm talking about the idea of God and thinking about God in certain way. I'm not even saying necessarily that God exists or doesn't exist. I'm just talking about the concept. So the whole idea of this book, as I said, is to reduce suffering in people and increase their ability to live their life and enjoy their life more. So really, it's a reference book. People have called it, those people who've read it have written, there's a whole bunch of reviews on Amazon and on different websites, book websites out there. There's a whole bunch of reviews about it. And people have called it a reference book to living life. That was my intention of writing the essays over the last half a dozen years, and then compiling them and putting them in this book form. I also have at the beginning a short chapter on my favorite Marcus Aurelius meditation. So Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor in the 2nd century, so 1800 years ago. And the reason I named it Marcus Aurelius Updated is because I resonated with his approach towards thinking about life. And he was a philosopher first, and he was a Roman emperor second, in his mind anyway. And so he thought about life in a very pragmatic, practical way of how he could live his own life in a better way, and to be happier and to be more productive and to fit into his community. He used the word community. We would say our social structure, our family, and our the country we live in and the world we live in. But he used the words community a lot in his what they later referred to as his meditations. I think the first person to pull together his ideas, he never thought that he would put them together in a book form, but somebody else did that, a few hundred years ago. But in around 800 AD, I think was the first time people found these pieces of parchment lying around, and where he had scribbled all these different notes and so forth that they were collected over about 10 or 12 years before he died.
Wow.
So that's my second book, really a guidebook to people can reference back to and look at these 67 essays and which topic jumps out at them. I suggest that people read it by looking at the table of contents and then reading the essay that jumps out at them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep. So let me ask you one thing, because I guess we're coming to the end, Kelvin. How do people reach you? I know you have a website for your organization. I guess the books are on Amazon. Can you just shout it out to the folks certain ways if they
Sure.
To follow up?
Yeah. If people want to reach me, probably the easiest thing to do is just Google my name, Kelvin Chin, KelvinChin. They Google my name. I'm the first 2 or 3 pages on Google that'll pop up. So I have 4 different websites. Probably the easiest one, again, to get to is just my name, kelvinchin.org. So it's .org because it's nonprofit. I do all my work through my nonprofits now. kelvinchin.org. And that will connect you to my other 3 websites. So I have 4 altogether. You can go to the bottom of any page of any website, and you'll see hot links to the other 3 websites, so you don't have to remember what they're called. So that'll take you to my meditation website, my fear of death website, which also covers my grief work. I help people with grieving, the loss of anything, often loved ones, but it could be loss of jobs. It could be a loss of a lot of things, loss of money, etc. And it'll also take you to my book website. You can read about my other 2 or 3 books I have in the works now. I have a book that's going to cover all of my past lives and so forth, and how it's developed since that first story I told you about that my aunts told me about when I was 1 year, 2 years old, talking with beings on the other side, to present. That will be that book. And then I have another book, which is going to be the sequel to my first book on overcoming the fear of death. And another thing that they should know about is my YouTube channel. So I have a YouTube channel with 100 or 200. Obviously, they're all free videos that people can check out, and they can just go to YouTube and just Google my name in the search window, and they'll find my YouTube channel.
Definitely, and I definitely follow the channel too.
Cool, awesome. The other thing I want to mention is I give a free session to anybody in the world about any of the topics that I talk about. We talked about today, or that you'll see on my website, a free session. It's on Zoom or on the phone. If you're in the U.S., we can just do it on the phone. If you're international, then on Zoom, so there's no phone call for you. But I do a free session with people about any of the topics that we covered, and that's all part of my nonprofit work. I never turn anybody away for any of my work for financial reasons.
Dope. That's what's up.
Very nice.
Definitely. I know. Our audience and the way I'm positioning this podcast is for groups that haven't had access to this information. So I know that haven't really been privy to like past lives and all the conversations we have.
Sure.
Because this is what I'm trying to open up people's eyes to what reality is. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because reality is one of those things that we don't really understand. We think we know reality, but I don't think we really know. You know what I mean? Just my own
Right.
personal experience of where I've come to a conclusion that.
Yeah, no, it's good work that you guys are doing. Good work.
Appreciate that.
But Kelvin, we appreciate you so much, man, and thank you so much, and we'll follow up. Thanks so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, both of you.
Thank
And we'll talk again soon. You guys take care.
Later.
Okay?
You as well.
And that's it, man. It's a wrap. Another showdown, and we'll see y'all next show. Peace.
Take care. Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We just finished up, bro.